You're listening to Co-op Radio, streaming at koop.org, radio for people, not for profit. This is Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. I'm Mike Wheat.
And I'm Kanya Lyons. Each week on our show, we get to know the people and programs that make the library a hub of learning, technology, and inspiration for our community.
Volumes. We bring the library to you every Wednesday at 7 p.m.
And today we are going to have a conversation with Debbie Scharven about the community impact that volunteers have at the library.
Yeah, but before we get into that, three of our favorite librarians are going to tell us about some of the great things happening at all of the Austin Public Library locations across town. Let's roll that.
My name is Blair Parsons, and I am a reference librarian at the Falk Central Library. Tuesday, January 3rd, the Hampton branch at Oak Hill hosts Steeped in Books, a weekly informal discussion about what you are reading. Tea will be served during this great time to pick up a few recommendations for what to read next. Steeped in Books begins at 2 o'clock, Tuesday, January 3rd, at the Hampton branch at Oak Hill. Thursday, January 5th, the Terrazas Branch Library hosts its monthly film and discussion series, Controversy and Conversation. This month's film is How to Die in Oregon. The discussion after the film will feature Cindy Merrill, co-founder of Texas Death with Dignity. The program begins at 7 o'clock, Thursday, January 5th, at the Terrazas Branch Library.
This is Kathleen Houlihan, the teen librarian at the Falk Center Library downtown, bringing you all the teen and tween events happening across the Austin Public Library system for the upcoming week. It's gaming tournament time, and we're jumping right in with a slew of Mario Kart 8 Wii U tournaments at the following dates and locations. Thursday, December 22nd at 12:30 p.m. at the Little Walnut Creek branch. Wednesday, December 28th at 3:30 p.m. at the Twin Oaks branch. Thursday, December 29th at 4 p.m. at the Millwood branch. Friday, December 30th at the University Hills branch. And the finals and wild card competition will be on Saturday, January 7th at the Cepeda branch. Also this week, we're holding a So Happy program at the Manchac Road branch on Tuesday, January 3rd, where teens and tweens can learn to sew. More library programs and details are at library.austintexas.gov/events.
This is Ann Minner, Youth Services Manager and Children's Librarian at the Old Quarry Branch. A great resolution for the new year is to read aloud to each other more often. Families that read together have more interesting discussions because reading aloud to children introduces them to words that are not used in everyday conversation. How often do stagecoaches, parakeets, or hibernation come up in regular chats? Reading aloud is widely recognized as the single most important activity leading to language development. It is a fun and easy way to expand vocabulary. Reading aloud also models expressive voice, which helps illustrate the use of punctuation and is a great public speaking skill. Reading aloud gives children the opportunity to practice their listening skills, and it builds motivation, curiosity, and memory. And the best part, reading aloud is fun. It is a time well spent together, laughing, talking, and enjoying books, and this helps form a positive association with books and reading later in life. Lots of books for all ages to share can be found at library.austintexas.gov.
Need an easy and fast way to get rid of an old car, truck, or boat you no longer want hanging around? Call Co-op's car donation program and we'll take it off your hands. Benefits include free pickup of your vehicle, no more gas guzzling, and a tax receipt for your donation. Just call 877-750-KOOP and we'll take care of the rest. That number again is 877-750-KOOP or 877-750-5667 to help Co-op today.
You're listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. In the studio with us today, we have Debbie Scharven, who is the volunteer coordinator for the Austin Public Library. Welcome, Debbie.
Yay. Hi, Debbie.
Guys. Hi.
Thanks for coming to visit us over here.
Well, I'm always at your desk anyway.
Yeah.
Why can't I come to the radio show?
True.
This is pretty norm. But our listeners don't know you yet. So, Debbie, let's start from the beginning. Where are you from?
Well, I am originally from Kansas, but my dad was Air Force, so I am a little bit of a mutt. I've grown up pretty much everywhere around the world.
That's great. Yeah.
And so it's actually kind of feeling like a little bit like home to come here because my dad was actually an Armed Forces radio DJ.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in radio stations being yelled at for being too loud in the background.
Well, we won't yell at you for being too loud.
That's why you get that awesome voice now.
Yes, I do. I have the radio voice.
Yes.
So, what brought you to Austin?
Well, we ended up in Texas when I was right before high school. So, of course, I think everybody comes to Austin for the first time because they go to UT. But I have been in and out of Austin and Texas for probably the last 20 or 25 years of my life.
Wow.
And so I've been in and out, and I've come here and gone, oh, I love it. And then gone, oh, a lot of new people. I need to leave for a little bit. And then I would go, oh, I miss Austin, and I miss Barton Springs, and I miss Schultz's, and I miss barbecue. And then I would come back.
So those are the mainstays that have at least survived, that keep you here?
Yes, the old Austin.
It's ever changing. So what has inspired you to start working as a volunteer coordinator?
Well, I think volunteering's always been in my blood. When I was in high school, I actually started as a volunteer camp counselor for a camp in the Hill Country for children with special needs and disabilities. And so over the years, I've always volunteered off and on, mostly doing things like animal-assisted therapy or the therapeutic horseback riding, things like that. And so when I had a chance to kind of just go, what do I want to do with my life now? I decided, let me try to figure out how I can help the world a little bit more. And volunteering was always it.
Because you got such an awesome feeling from volunteering. You wanted to spread that to the whole world.
Of course, everybody loves to volunteer. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, giving gives the most. It's so true. Well, so can you maybe give us a little taste of a day in the life at your job? I know you wear so many hats, but maybe just give us a little sense of what it's like to be Debbie.
I think it should be more exciting than it is because some days I feel I'm a little more attached to the phone and the computer than I want to be. But I do a lot of phone calls talking to people who want to volunteer here at the library, telling them kind of what we have, how we can do a good match with them, trying to figure out what works for them and works for us as the library. I work with staff a lot, trying to figure out, hey, I've got this volunteer, I've got this person, I've got this project. Can we find somebody to do it? So I spend a lot of my time kind of mixing and matching people, projects, locations. I also spend a lot of time doing a lot of program building. So a lot of some of the dry stuff like handbooks and policies and or all those kind of rules that people don't want to think about.
Well, we're grateful you're doing it. They're
Yes,
definitely necessary.
thank you.
And it's been showing in all the extra stuff we're able to do with all the wonderful volunteers we get. Again, for all of you who might just tuned in, we're talking today with volunteer coordinator Debbie Scharven of the Austin Public Library.
Yeah, so can we talk a little bit about the types of work that volunteers do at the library and kind of the impact that that has on our community?
Well, I think everybody needs to know that volunteers are our support system. I think anybody at the library who is a staff member knows that having a volunteer helps us do a little bit more, a little bit better. I'll go a little bit farther in whatever kind of project that we have. So we have volunteers doing a lot of different things at the library. We've got them working in circulation, helping shelving books, processing holds, getting those materials back on the shelf so customers can check them out
More quickly.
More quickly. We've got volunteers running a lot of different types of community programs, our language programs, our citizenship classes, our craft classes. We have a lot of volunteers doing that, book clubs. We also have volunteers working at the History Center. The Austin History Center has a lot of them working on various archival projects and materials. We've got volunteers at a Recycled Reads bookstore. They help get materials out. They help do recycled craft projects. We've got volunteers in our administration doing records management. We've got it all.
Yeah. I remember from when I used to work at the Windsor Park branch, first introduced to some of our volunteers. We had plenty, but it was never an end to stuff that we needed them to do for us, just to keep us on track. We were a pretty busy branch. We had a lot of, I would say, families that did homeschooling that would check out tons of material, and we had quite a lot of material coming in and out of our holds program that without the volunteers' help, I mean, we may not have gotten things turned around as on time. You know.
Volunteers are definitely our worker bees. They work right alongside of our staff in doing so many things that people in the community don't often think about when they're actually just going to get their book or their video or their DVD and checking it out, or coming to the library from a program. There's so many things that are behind the scenes.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. How many volunteers do you think APL has right about now? Rough guess.
We usually average somewhere around 230 to 250 volunteers in a given month. Different months, we have peaks and valleys. Obviously, during December and November, we have a lot of volunteers that go on vacation, take a little bit of a break. But we have our peak usually in our summer seasons where we're averaging about 280 volunteers a month.
I guess more parents get more time off now that the kids are.
Yes, we do have a lot of parents that enjoy our teens coming to volunteer, and then like to have that as a little bit of an escape. We have ways to get everybody volunteering.
I can't wait to offload my teen on APL one day soon when she's old enough.
We start at age 13.
She's almost there. She's 12 and a half. So in the library's marketing and communications division where I work, I have worked a lot with volunteers in a number of different capacities, especially like volunteers who have specialized skills to work on like a specific project or a specific task. Like, for example, right now I have a volunteer translator, Heidi, who helps translate press releases, signage, all kinds of important things because,
Yeah, and
a third of our population speaks Spanish, and that's very important to us to communicate. And then we got Sev here, who is a volunteer, and he helps us with the radio show every week. Hey, Sev.
Hello.
Hey, do you want to talk for a second about why you chose to volunteer at the library?
Oh, I'd be delighted. Yeah, it's been, libraries have been a huge part of my learning my entire life, from my library in my hometown to the Minneapolis library when I lived there, and just in my development as an artist as well. And I'm delighted to be able to give back by volunteering and providing the knowledge and experience I've gained in my career in media production. When I lived in Boston, I worked at a NBC affiliate and on a news program. I ran the teleprompter. And so I also was a part of a producers collective in Somerville, Mass., and we co-produced a bi-weekly live 60-minute community affairs program on cable access. So it's been really great to be able to share the knowledge I've gained in my career and contribute to this program. On this program, I edit audios and I assist in the production needs to prepare for our live shows, and then work here with you here in the studio at Co-op.
And we really, really rely on you, and we really appreciate the work that you do.
Can't say that enough.
Yeah.
This definitely could not be happening without the help of Sev and all your expertise.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm glad I can be helpful.
And Debbie, can you talk more about volunteer-led programs at the library?
Well, we actually have a lot of the community programs that the branch locations in the Central Library put on that have volunteers who actually lead or instruct the classes. So we have everything from our language practice programs, our talk time, and our Practiquemos Español en que me cuentas, to citizenship classes, to book clubs, craft classes, and kind of everything in between.
It's a huge range of things, and there's so much that we do that are, most people don't even know about. I've noticed that there seems to be like a really consistent demand for citizenship classes. I get calls all the time, and the language practice groups. Like, what other volunteer-led programs are like high demand?
Well, I would actually think, it depends. what perspective you're talking from. I think the community, I get a lot of calls as well about which locations have talk time programs, who want to practice English and some of those conversational skills. So for me, talk time is probably one of the biggest ones I get asked about. But I also get Talk Time is one of the most requested programs that people want to volunteer in. Oh. And so for me, Talk Time kind of comes to the top of the pile. But we actually get a lot of inquiries and requests to teach and to have classes for different computer skills. So we have a lot of volunteers who teach computer skills and classes around the system. So we have different Excel classes, different Word classes, resume building classes. I know we're going to be doing some more advanced computer classes up at, I think, Millwood or Little Walnut coming up in the next couple of months with some volunteers that'll be leading the charge.
That's great. Yeah, so there's definitely always a need, sometimes the old ones and the new ones. Mm-hmm. Additional details about volunteering at the library are available online at library.austintexas.gov/volunteer. Again, thank you, Debbie, for joining us for this talk today. If it's okay with you, we'd like to bring you back here in a few minutes to talk stats on just after this podcast.
Always.
Excerpt.
I can nerd out.
Sweet.
Yay. So next up, we're going to play an excerpt from the library's podcast called Austin Speaks, which highlights Austin Public Library's social media ambassadors. And this clip features Terry Morriston, who is a former school librarian, and she is a current volunteer with the library, and she's talking about what the library means to her.
I think that libraries welcome everyone. And when I walk into a library, and I go to a library if I'm traveling, if I'm visiting someone, if I've moved somewhere even for a few months, the first place I go to is the library because it's the center of the community. We don't have, Texas had dance halls. Pittsburgh actually had fire halls or ethnic organizations, but those are few and far in between anymore. But people still have libraries in their community, and I think they represent that center of the community when people did come together on a Saturday night or on a Monday morning. And you don't pay to go there. It's free. And so anybody can walk through that door, and everybody is treated in that same way. You can ask for a book, and it doesn't cost you anything. I recognize that there's a charge in many communities for a library card. It's usually a nominal charge. And therefore, I think it breaks down barriers. I see moms with infants, and I've been in library programs where they had actually infant story hours. Moms sat on babies' laps while the librarian read the books, but yet I see people who are great grandparents, maybe sometimes with the toddlers or just sometimes there by themselves. And I don't think there are many organizations in our community that have that type of economic depth and breadth of their patrons or their customers or clients, as well as the different ages. So I really do see the library is for everyone. From the time that I first went to the library with my mother, one of my earliest memories is having my mother take me to the library and tell me that she certainly couldn't afford to keep me in books if she had to buy them, but that the library could keep me in books. And, that progressed through all the libraries that were in my life. So that was the little storefront library. It became the school libraries where I started volunteering to shelf books from the time I was in early elementary school, and then to high school where it was a good place truly to go and socialize and meet your friends and look at some books and then magazines. And then eventually became a career where I could reach out and touch the hearts of people. And I think being a librarian in a school particularly allowed me to do that. And even though some of my former students have their own, even high school students now, we still stay connected. And we have that library experience in common. And so I hope I've shared that with their families, and then I can continue to do that and feel good about who I am and what I've done by being in the Austin Public Library. And I'm so grateful that the library gives me that chance to do that.
You're listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show.
On Co-op 91.7 FM, Hornsby, Austin, radio for people, not for profit.
Co-op Radio features roots programming every morning of the week. This is Rod Moog inviting you to join me for the country, swing, and rockabilly jamboree Thursday mornings from 9 to 11. Our country is classic, our swing is western, and the rockabilly is the early kind from the mid-1950s. Thursday mornings 9 to 11. Look for you there.
And we're back with the Austin Public Library radio show, Volumes. That right before the break, you were listening to an excerpt from the Austin Speaks podcast featuring social media ambassador and volunteer at the library, Terry Morriston. Austin Speaks and many other Austin Public Library podcasts can be found at library.austintexas.gov/volumes.
That's no lie. And we're back with Debbie here in the studio. I had a follow-up question. Like, I wanted to talk about stats, but before we get to that, I bet you get a lot of people wanting to volunteer to read with kids. And what do you have to tell them?
I think you hit my biggest conversation that I get every day. I probably get a call like that. We do get a lot of interest in people who want to read to children as a volunteer opportunity. Unfortunately, that is actually not something we have at the library because we have professional librarians. They go to school. This is their profession. This is their life on how to teach literacy to children, that we choose to leave that in the hands of the professionals. So our volunteers are actually, again, their support system. Mm-hmm. So they help at those programs. They might help with the crowd control, and they might help prep some of the crafts that they might do as part of the story time programs. They help youth librarians in other ways, but reading, unfortunately, is not one of them. And I think actually one of the other calls I usually get is all about when can I volunteer at my library down the street? And why don't you have an opening there? And it's hard to explain sometimes to our community that we have a capacity. You know, every branch has a different system on how they work and how much they need volunteers in different types of positions. And so not every location will have a volunteer opportunity every week. And so sometimes it takes a while for those opportunities to come open.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother used to volunteer at the library in Houston when I was a kid. And it really brought her a lot of like joy and fulfillment in her retirement. And I think she was a door counter, but she would talk about it at length and how much, made her smile, and she got to talk to people. And so I think we were kind of talking a little bit over the break about sort of like why people volunteer. And it seems a lot of times it's because like for social reasons and for like to give back to the community. And it kind of, you want to talk a little bit about that a little more?
Every person is a little bit different about why they want to volunteer, but probably the most named reason that I hear from volunteers is because they grew up in the library or they love the library. They want to give back to the library for whatever reason. Sometimes it's somebody who has been new to the country and the library has really been a way that they've come to socialize and become an American citizen. Sometimes it's the teen who grew up in the library and loves to read and wants to become a librarian. So people volunteer for different reasons, but giving back is definitely the biggest reason. We also have different reasons for socialization, networking. A lot of people volunteer to build skills for their resume or add this to their resume because they want to be a librarian or go to library school. They kind of try out the librarian working here to see if this is really going to be a good career move for them. We have a lot of different reasons, so it really just kind of depends on the person, but giving back, and people are really attached. Austin is really attached and really fond of their libraries, and I'm glad because that means I always have good volunteers.
Right. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and it's like,
and that we're doing something right.
Yeah, and it's like, it's true. It's like the more you give, the more you get, when you volunteer, like you you might think you're doing it to pad your resume, but ultimately you're doing it because it makes you feel good at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that there have been studies out there that show that volunteering help both emotional and physically the person who volunteers. There's actually a study, and I couldn't quote it, but if you want me to quote it, please call and I'll give you the actual report. But basically, people who volunteer are 42% more likely to say they are very happy. And to me, that says a lot about the kind of person who comes to volunteer and what we're doing for the community and for the world in general.
And the power of giving, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so we have a little segment that we've started doing lately called Stats on Stacks. And this isn't really about stacks so much as it is about volunteers, but we're going to stick with that name. But basically, we're going to talk about the actual, let's talk numbers. What are volunteers doing for the library?
Well, I think when you think about what volunteers do for the library, you actually have to look at some of the statistics that are actually just the library in general. I don't think people realize that each year we have 4.8 million pieces of physical material, books, DVDs that go in and out of our doors. We have 3.2 million customers come through our doors. We have 8,800 community programs that go on, from everything from Meet the Authors to our story times. And volunteers are all part of that. So I know I told you earlier that we average somewhere 230, 250 volunteers in a given year or any given month, but that averages then to about 3,000 volunteers over the course of a year.
Wow.
And so then they give about 26,000 hours.
Oh my goodness.
That's a lot of hours.
And so that's a lot of time and energy. The community says, thank you, Austin Public Library, for being here, and we support what you do, which is just amazing. And so the national statistic is 62 million people in the United States volunteer at least an hour a week. And so I can't thank our volunteers and our community enough that 3,000 of them choose to give that hour to us.
Let's try to hit as many of them as we can right now. Thank you, volunteers.
Thank you. Thank you.
From
yes.
every part of our heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it just blows me away, because if the libraries weren't here and the volunteers weren't here, our libraries wouldn't be able to do the kind of service to the community that the community expects.
That's not an overstatement.
You'd be waiting a lot longer for those materials.
Yeah.
Yes, those days and waiting for the holds.
Yeah. We don't have an automated system.
No, our volunteers, our staff and volunteers do that as a team.
Yes, and God bless them.
Yes.
So, I guess we're getting just about to the end of this segment.
Well, let's give our thanks again to Debbie Scharven for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Debbie.
And again, details about volunteering at the library can be found at library.austintexas.gov/volunteer.
And we want to thank another volunteer today who has helped us out, Aaron Cornett. Thank you so much for being our engineer today while DJ's off gallivanting around New Mexico.
Bring us some peppers.
We really appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you. And next week, we're going to have Ann Minner on the show with us, and she's going to talk about our new season of Storytime at the Austin Public Library. And additional information about this and all things Austin Public Library can be found at library.austintexas.gov. Thanks for listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. Details at library.austintexas.gov/volumes.
Want to give a special thanks to our audio engineer, DJ Harris, and our volunteer production assistant, Sev Corson.
And thanks to the musicians who composed and performed our original theme song: Andrew Noble on violin, Kirk Duvall on guitar, and APL's very own Mike Wheat on percussion.
Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show, airs Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on KOOP.org Community Radio.